Hello, thank you for stopping on my video. My name is Becky and this is BecxReadz. I post videos every 5 days and if I can manage, I will squeeze some in between. And today I have a super fun video for you that I got all dressed up for. The lovely Hannah at Hannah Blackwell created the fantasy romance reader book tag, and she asked me if I would participate in its debut along with a few other lovely booktubers. So here I am to answer some questions about my love of fantasy romance. This is my fantasy romance alter ego. Her name is Ravery. She is a blue-haired witch with a purple pet dragon named Hyacinth. She loves crowns. Her hat is down in the basement though, and she didn't feel like going to get it. So for these questions, I am going to try my best not to say A Court of Thorns and Roses for every single answer. The first question is, what book got you into fantasy romance for the first time? So the first book that I ever remember reading that was fantasy romance, and it wasn't even classified as fantasy romance back in the day. It's classified as paranormal romance, but it is 100% a fantasy romance. And that is Dragon Actually by G.A. Aiken. This is the first book in her Dragonkin series, which is a fantasy romance dragon shifter series. I read this for the first time, I believe, in 2012, and I actually did a vlog last year where I reread it for the first time. And I actually upped my star rating for this because I enjoyed it so much, because now knowing it's a fantasy romance, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more. This is the story of Annwyl the Bloody, who is a slaying queen. She will kill anybody in sight, and she's trying to overthrow her ruthless brother from the throne. So she is out decapitating his soldier. And one day, she gets caught off guard and she gets taken down. And so this black dragon named Fergus finds her, and he takes her to his cave and tries to heal her. And when she comes to, he tells her that he will help train her so it doesn't happen again. So he sends this man to train her. But it turns out that this man is just Fergus in his human form. But she doesn't know that. And lo and behold, she ends up being his mate. So this does have a fated mate situation in it, and it does follow an entire family of these dragon shifters as they find their love interest. I am actually rereading this series very slowly, mind you. I've only reread the first 2 books, but I am still very much enjoying it. So this was the first one that actually introduced me to fantasy romance. The one that really sparked my love for it, that made me voraciously seek them out since fantasy romance has become a thing, would be ACOTAR. If you could pick one fantasy world to move to for the rest of your life, which world would you move to? Besides Valaris? So I am going to say a world that I just read recently. It is from this book called The Gardener and the Water Horse by Mallory Dunlin. This world was so simple, but so beautiful. It is this very lush, magical island that is surrounded by this magical lake who has the ability to turn into a horse and a man. It's got this magical spire on it that is sort of like an epicenter for magical beings to like teleport themselves to, and the people who live on this island live in this spire. It's got a kitchen floor, it's got a pool floor, it's got several floors of gardens and greenhouses. It's got a whole library floor, it's got a floor of like bedrooms, and then outside it's got gardens and the lake, of course, and mountains. So it has everything you would need to live, and it's just so magical, but it's isolated from all like the outsiders. So you wouldn't have to deal with a lot of people, which, I'm not gonna lie, something I would be down for. If you could marry one bookish hero or heroine, who would it be? Besides Cassian? I'm sorry. Okay, we're gonna go with one of my favorite book boyfriends and the hero of my favorite fantasy romance series ever, and that is Brishan from Radiance by Grace Draven. I love Brishan. I love that he's so open-minded, he communicates so well. He's kind of scary when you first see him, but once you get to know his heart and how he treats his people and how he wants to live life, this man has it going on. Plus, he's kind of a little bit of a monster. He's got claws and glowing eyes, and I'm sort of in my monster phase right now, so that's attractive. And I just love the relationship that he has with Ildiko. So if Ildiko were in the picture, I would marry Brishan. Matches my hair too. If you could be one fantasy creature or magical being, what would you be? A Pegasus. I love horses. They are my favorite animal, and I feel like if I were just like standing out in a field somewhere and my wings weren't out, nobody would know that I was a Pegasus. And then when people weren't around, I could just spread my glorious wings and fly wherever the hell I wanted to fly. I think that would be freaking magical. So, Pegasus. If you could kill one fantasy romance character, who would you off? This was not a difficult question for me. I would kill off Midas. I hate this man. he needs to die. He needs to die a slow, painful, torturous, agonizing death. Does he get killed? Read the series and find out. But yeah, he needs to die. A world without him? Great. What fantasy romance character do you truly believe would be your in real life best friend? So I am going to say Amira from Serpent's Touch by Marina Simcoe. She is a character who has been abused in her life, and she is living in this traveling menagerie freak show. She is the only human there. She doesn't really have a lot of friends, which that tends to be the kind of people I gravitate toward, is people like me who don't have a lot of friends. She's a very sweet character, and she's a very shy character, though. I'm a very shy person, so I tend to gravitate toward other shy people. I like her character growth within this duology. She goes from being this meek girl who is so unsure of herself to being this literal fucking queen. And I just loved her character. And I think she would be somebody who I could vibe with, where she's not like overly aggressive, she's not super popular. So I feel like she and I would be good in real life best friends, and we would bring out the extrovert in each other. What would be your fantasy weapon of choice? A dagger, since I have one. I am legally blind, so I would not be great at weapons that require long-term aim. I also have a lack of depth perception, so I cannot aim for shit. This is why I can't throw things straight. I can't catch things. So I need to be up close and personal to get stabby with somebody. My fantasy romance character, she would probably just wave her finger and magic somebody right to the grave. Who is the sexiest fantasy romance character of all time? I could not move past ACOTAR for this. There are other characters that I am attracted to more that aren't so sexy, aka Brishan. But the sexiest fantasy romance character of all time, in my opinion, Cassian. Give me Cassian. Like, look at this man. Like, shoulder-length hair, wingspan, tattoos, muscles, has a sense of humor, good heart. Pick one fantasy romance book to burn. Most of them get 3 or more stars from me because I do just like fantasy romance in general, but there was one book that I did give like 2 stars. And I had to think, I'm like, is it really a fantasy romance? But it's set in a fantasy world and it does have romance. So I am going to burn The Undertaking of Heart Mercy. I hated this book. It was so dumb. I hated the characters. I hated the setting choice. The fantasy aspect of it is so minor that you could have set this in like a dystopian Earth and the romance would have made just as much sense. I also thought their enemies to lovers relationship was so stupid, so dumb, so childish. These characters reminded me of like 14-year-olds on a playground where the boy pushes the girl down and calls her names because he likes her. I hated it. Burn it. Trash it. Set it on fire. If you could pick one fantasy romance book, the only book you will ever be able to read again, what is it? Okay, I'm cheating on this, and instead of picking just one book, I'm picking a whole flippin' series, because if you give me one book, I'm gonna get tired of reading that one book over and over for the rest of my life. But if you give me a series, I can stretch it out, I can take my time with it, it will be fine. I'm going to pick the Legends of the Storm series by Beck McMaster. This is so far a 5-book series. There is another one supposedly coming soon, but it starts with Heart of Fire, and this is a dragon shifter fantasy romance set in like a historical Iceland. So the setting isn't too fantastical because it is in a real place. However, the politics and the court setup and the dynamics and the magic that are in here make it a fantasy romance in my opinion, and I absolutely love this. So we are following this group of Dreki siblings, Dreki being dragons. They have been pretty much banished from their court because their mother is this truly evil queen. And they are trying to win back their court and overthrow their mother. So each story you follow a different sibling as they find their soulmate, have their romance, and the overarching plot is them taking back their throne. The 4th and 5th book made me freaking cry. I did just a video recently of Books That Made Me Cry. I will link that down below. those two were in it. And I just love this fantasy world. I love these siblings, and I love this court setup that is going on. So this is definitely one that if I could just read one series for the rest of my life, it would be this, and I would take my sweet little time doing it. If you could recommend one fantasy romance book to a reader that was new to the genre and wanted to try it out, what book would it be? I think the Paper Magician series by Charlie Ann Holmberg would be a great place to start in fantasy romance if you're new to the fantasy romance genre. This is a historical fantasy romance, and it's a very sweet fantasy romance. No spice in this book at all. Great chemistry, no spice. I feel like if you're somebody who doesn't read romance all that much, this would be a great place to start. If you're coming from like a historical fiction standpoint and you want to dip into fantasy romance, this would be a great place to start. If you're coming from YA and you love like the YA fantasy romance, but you want to get into like the new adult and the adult, this would be a great segue into that. This is about Sienna, who is a young woman who has just graduated. She wants to be a master magician. So she has to go apprentice under somebody, and she gets tasked with being a paper magician. She's not thrilled about that because, like, what is she gonna do with paper? So she goes to Emery Thane's house. He is the master paper magician, and he is training her in all the things she needs to know to be a master paper magician. But when she's there, one of Emery's exes comes along and hurts him. So Sienna has to go, and she has to travel through his literal heart to try and bring him back and save his life. And she does this with the help of her little paper dog, Fennel. So cute. I loved it. This is a 3-book series, and it is a bit of a mentor-mentee relationship, sort of professor-student, but she is over 18. She's not really in college or anything. She's just apprenticing. But it's got that, but it is set in the 1800s, so you're gonna get those times of, oh, he sees like her ankle and he's like obsessed with it. And the last question is just tag some fantasy romance friends. I am going to tag Kaylani at Kaylani Simply Me and April at Happily Ever April. I would love to see y'all's answers. That is it for this fantasy romance reader book tag. Thank you, Hannah, for inviting me to be in the debut of this. If you have made it this far in the video, could you leave me a blue heart emoji to match my blue hair? And until my next video, thank you so much for watching, and go read a fantasy romance for me. Bye!